Anyway, this talk, for those of you who've been at BOSC for a little longer than just this year, used to be actually, we'll remember that this talk used to be in the morning before the keynote of the second day. And so I guess it's been kind of demoted to this least desirable spot on the whole agenda. That's either due to you because you never came to when I spoke in the morning, or it's due to me. I don't remember that you didn't come to those talks when the talk was still in the morning, so I think it must be my fault. Anyway, enough with a self-deprecation intro here. I'm going to introduce to you the OBF, the foundation that runs this conference, and I'll also give you a little bit of an update and a little bit of an introspection, and because it is almost lunchtime, I'm going to try to keep both light. And so here we go. I will start out with this overview of the OBF that those of you who have been here before have seen in more or less exactly this form before. But I think it's also, it is important for me to give this overview of what the Open Bio Foundation is every year again, because I do think we have new people coming here into this community and coming here into this conference every year. And this is very important to me, and I want to be welcoming to new people every year, even if only by the fact that I don't just assume everybody here knows this. And so what is OBF? OBF is the umbrella organization for the BioStar projects and a couple more projects actually also. Most well known among those probably the MBOSS project. We're nonprofit, we're entirely volunteer run, and you can find our mission statement, what we're all about, boiled down to essentially one sentence or two on the homepage. And so what are we about? What is this? We're about promoting the practice and philosophy of open source software development, and really also open science more generally, specifically within the life sciences. What do? We sponsor and run this conference, BOSC, also other events that are all aimed towards nurturing and promoting community among our member projects and among the field as a whole. For example, you might have heard already mentioned the CodeFest that we're going to hear separately about too, I think, a summary from Brad, I believe, that's somewhere in the program. We run hackathons, and we're also, and I'll spend a minute on that too. We're also, again this year, we're mentoring, and we have been previous year, mentoring organization in the Google Summer of Code program. We do some advocacy, though that's not really our main business, and we accept donations and try to support people in the community, for example, in their ability to attend this conference here and other community events. And we manage assets. These assets are essentially all digital, like our domain names, for example, but then also the mailing lists, and so on and so forth. We're governed by a board of directors. Right now there's six directors on the board. One of them is myself, and you also see I'm going to point them out here because I also want to put some faces behind the figures behind that are actually running and serving, running things and serving. To our community, and so Peter, you've already seen him up here, right? He's a director, he's a secretary. Nomi, she's been up here, she's also director on the board. Chris has just introduced me, he's on the board, and then there's also Chris Agdigian, who I believe can't be here, though he's actually based in Boston, and I don't know, they may have he's with BioTeam, they may have a booth at the main conference, and Jason, who's been with us and with BioPearl from the very earliest days. We're a membership organization. You can apply to become a member. The membership's been increasing over the years, but the picture in reality is perhaps not quite as well as this might convey, because for one, you might notice the scale on the left-hand side there is linear, not exponential, and if really adoption of this kind of membership happens, you would want to see a little bit more than a linear increase here. And then also, if you compare it to memberships on developer mailing lists for member projects, there are actually a magnitude more people out there who participate in an active way in our member projects. So there's certainly a lot of work to do yet to convey to the people who are active on our projects the benefits of becoming a member and taking a more active role in actually shaping what the OBF does. Just want to briefly point out there's a membership application. Yes, it's a form that you print out. Yes, that's old style, previous century. I've issued a call for volunteers to help us with that. It hasn't really been answered. Maybe this year somebody will. We're also no longer an organization or an entity that's incorporated itself. Instead, we're an associated project with a software in the public interest, which is a fiscal sponsorship organization. What this allows us is to, on the one hand, accept donations that are tax exempt, and actually through an arm of them of SPI that they have in Europe, we can also accept tax exempt donations in Europe. If you click on our link that is on our homepage, there's this little bluish box that's here. I believe that's on the front page. If you click through there, you will also find instructions to donate money to us tax exempt in Europe. I'm not going to explain that any further. The other thing that this affiliation with SPI really allows us, so on one hand they manage our assets and ensure that they're preserved, their ownership is preserved, so to speak, in perpetuity, in that if our organization itself becomes dormant or anything else happens that we no longer can function this way that we do now, the assets are still can continue to be held and administered, including, for example, our domain names. They don't just get lost as it happens with many projects in scientific software projects, right? As we well know, URLs go away, etc. We use we try hard to use open processes and collaborative processes to as much as we can. Our policy documents are not only publicly available, they're also openly developed on GitHub. You can fork the repository, propose changes if you spot a typo or anything. This includes a policy on how to actually become an OBF affiliated project. That's been started last year. It's not developed much from that. It's a little bit of a stall project. And so let me kind of close up the overview of what OBF is, what we do, and how we do things, and how we're governed, and I'll say just a few things about what happened, highlight a few things of what happened since the conference last year. So for one, we held elections. There were 3 seats on the board of directors that became open for re-election. In all 3 cases, there were directors on the board that we ran, myself as president. Nomi stepped down from the officer role that she held until last year and is now director at large. And Peter Koch volunteered to serve in the secretary position, and now finally we have a secretary. And thank you, Peter. We're also, after a hiatus of 1 year, we're again participating as a mentoring organization in the Google Summer of Code. Yay, which is really a big accomplishment, and I want to give a shout out and call out the 2 people who stepped up to, because when we were at the point that Google was starting to ask for mentoring organization applications, we didn't really have anybody in a position to step up and shepherd the mentoring organization application and act as our administrators. And so 2 people stepped up and responded to our call, and that's Eric Telovich. Please stand up. Eric, where are you? I want everybody to know Eric. He was here earlier, I know. And Raul Bonal. Let's give them a hand. The application was successful, and so we received slots for 6 students, and there's a student that now works on a project on BioPython, one that works on a project in BioRuby, and there's 4 more students that work on projects that maybe are not necessarily so familiar to all of you, or at least you may not have thought of OBF projects. And officially, they actually are not, right? So these 2 projects are by Haskell, which has 1 student, and JSBML, which took the remaining 3 slots. And so 4 out of our 6 students actually are from projects that aren't strictly speaking OBF affiliated projects, right? This isn't it's an accident in some way in that this is how the most qualified students turn out to be. But it's not an accident in other ways, in that we intentionally actually, and that was a choice that the 2 administrators made very early on. And so, again, I want to give them a shout out for this, to promote inclusivity. Inclusivity among umbrella organizations, to be not strictly focused on their own projects, but also to help out others that are closely related in mission and in what they're doing. And so something that has helped us in the past, for example, last year where we weren't accepted, where other mentoring organizations took on some of our projects like SciRuby, SciPython, right now we're helping, and this year we're helping out others. Another thing that's ongoing is solving the problem of hosting. You may know that, meanwhile, most of the, actually since about a month or 2, everything that we host has been moved to the Amazon cloud. But the costs of that are really stacking up. Well, we don't have a huge income stream, and so it's really eating up almost all, or at least a major part of our income stream. And so we've been talking to the Open Source Lab at Oregon State University. They've expressed an interest. But what's been the slow part here is gathering the information that they need to actually, budget accordingly and get a picture for them as to what they're actually getting themselves into. And so this leads me it's a little bit of a segue to the introspection part, if you will. But before I get to that, the other things I want to highlight aren't strictly OBF things, but are actually things that and so that I still want to intentionally include here, because what this is about is the community of is open source and the community of people developing open source in science. And so there are 2 things that I wanted to point out in this realm that aren't coming really out of OBF or OBF related initiatives, but that are very much related to what this community is about and what we value. And so one of these is the first workshop on sustainable software for science, practice, and experiences held last year in November, for which now a special issue was published in the Journal of Open Research Software. I'd encourage everyone to take a look at the special issue. You probably find one or another article, if not multiple, that you find very interesting, especially if what you care about is open source projects and their sustainability, how they can keep on, how they can grow the community, how they can grow with their adoption, and so on and so forth. The special issue does have contributions actually from people in the room here, I know, and I myself, with co-authors, also contributed to the workshop as a whole. The other thing that I want to highlight here is a foundation specifically for the scientific Python community that's not come into place exactly last year, but that's really gone off the ground in a really great way last year, and that's Namfocus. It has values and objectives very congruent with the ones we have, except they're, at least in their starting phase, that they're relatively focused on Python, though they're rapidly expanding to other programming languages as well. But they're coming out of the scientific Python community. They also have a fiscal sponsorship and associated project programs and so on and so forth. So if you haven't heard about Namfocus yet, definitely recommend to check them out. You know, I hinted at the segue, kind of what I'm trying to get at here with regard to the little introspection part, is sustainability is hard. It's a hard problem. And that's not only so for software projects. Sustainability is also hard for organizations, and it's hard for even communities. And we're faced with this ourselves. You know, just to give you an example from our own work here from our own foundation, what we do ourselves, doing what we do in terms of services that we provide for our member projects, doing this in a professional manner is really, really hard when all you have is volunteers. And so as an example, the sysadmin work that we do, that we have to do, is just, despite regular calls for volunteers and everything, still in practice, it always comes back and falls back on the same two people who are overworked, who have day jobs, you know, and have generally too little time. So yeah, I've been wondering for a long time how to solve this problem, that it's really hard. We want to be professional, right? But it's really difficult to be professional if all you have is volunteers. And so this is not a problem that's specific to our community. It's not that, you know, it's just so happens in our community that all the sysadmins are either lazy or unwilling or maybe not interested. Actually, other communities that are even more technical, say, than we are, for example, SPI has the exact same problems, right? As I didn't know earlier on, but now, you know, I've had some insight too. And even Namfocus, as a completely volunteer organization, you know, has run into similar problems of, you know, where do you get the manpower to do something professionally if all you have is volunteer time? So that's a problem that is awaiting solutions. And if you have thoughts on that, I'd be really glad to hear. I'm really all open. And I'd love to hear really good ideas. It's a problem I've been thinking about and struggling with for a long time, and you know, I'd love to do something about it. So yeah, so what's next? As I just said, you know, I'd really love to find something that allows us to improve our professionalism. And maybe one way is to simply do more of what we do well and do less of the things that, you know, we apparently can't find enough volunteers for. But that has consequences, right? Other things, and they're ongoing, right? They're sort of larger level goals that I have for myself, if you will, for the time I'm in this role of president, is partner with organizations that are well aligned with us, you know, kind of joining forces in some ways to get better economies of scale for certain things that are hard to do alone. The other thing is we actually have some resources. We have financial assets, and while we don't have a secure income stream, it's also become clear that if we just sit on those funds in order to have them for rainy days, it's standing in the way of actually showing what we can do in order to secure more funding, okay, and donations from funders. So we're really looking for opportunities to put those funds to good value, to something that allows us to show impact, and that then subsequently allows us to show what we can do and why we deserve more money from our donors, okay? Again, I'd love to hear ideas for what we could do, you know, for how we can effectively invest that money in a way that has payoffs in multiple ways. We've been using it so far on a relatively modest basis, such as supporting people, you know, to attend the Code Fest, to attend this conference, who otherwise wouldn't be able to, you know. But there are other things that we could do with that too. And I think that's it. Connect with us if you haven't yet. On Twitter, on our blog, and join us as a member. Help shape us. Thank you.